The difference is this textbook privileged information design doesn't translate very gracefully into that scenario. So what we've been working on a lot in Subnet One since we last saw you is what are the building blocks that will enable us to ensure that we can perform much better than just taking a leading open source model off the shelf and giving you that as a reply. So that would be like deterministic inference. We take R1 off the shelf. You ask us a question, and then what we say is whatever R1 says, to be honest, and mimic that. What we've been doing instead is using what's known as test time compute. So basically lots more tokens, much more structured thinking patterns, so that the validators can calibrate this sort of measurement stick as to how good the miner responses are based on some much more complex and, again, more complete understanding of what the user request is. And one way that we gamify that right now is using what we call time dilation, which is basically the validator may have 1 hour to produce this phenomenal polished response. It searches the web, it writes some code, it uses some tools, all of the modern parts of an AI system that people are getting used to, whereas the miners have to match that quality in 5 seconds. And that asymmetry in time translates into a really interesting game as well, which we're all in on that. That's really what we're thinking about right now. How can we make that as challenging as possible for miners and improve the quality of responses? But did you want to jump on that?
I think for the listener, an example of this is on Subnet One, we've chosen to, for a period of time, keep using Llama 3 as the validator model. And Llama 3 is like a good model. It's sort of 4, 5, 6 months out of date now. But what we've been able to do is force miners to respond with much more powerful models for a cheaper compute cost on our side. So we've done some analysis where we check the models that we think miners use, and we know miners have responded with R1 against Llama 70B, which previously in Bittensor you hadn't seen. It's just bastardizations of Llama with a few bells and whistles. We've seen miners have used on deep research, combinations of the two. And this is really promising for us because what it says is previously, and with a lot of the deterministic subnets, the validator is the arbiter of intelligence. It becomes like a block. You cannot become more clever than this. And what we've proven with the SM1 validation is the miners can be as clever as they want. And the more clever they are, the more reward they'll receive, which is really exciting for us as it means you can start to get into this uncapped space where some OpenAI assistant might be running a secret version of their model off because it gets more reward. Or, you know, we think at one point we actually saw some responses from like the Grok 3 release early, but we're not sure about that.
It's also it's very reminiscent of Subnet 1's original design, which was a mixture of experts model. Like the subnet topology was almost designed to sort of mimic a certain type of bidding mechanism, but one can imagine a future state where to reduce duplication and wasted effort in the network, miners can just claim the right to work on a certain task. And in this case, once you've scraped all of whether it's the historical price trends for NVIDIA or whether it's Nature papers, when the work is done and there's only a trickle of 1 or 2 coming in per day, the market can just solve that for us. We don't need to worry about opening and closing valves here. The miners know they'll get paid per paper. They know they can't fabricate things. They know they can't duplicate things. The arena is set, so to speak. And at that point, you know, what will tend to happen is the collective attention of the miners will go to whatever is most lucrative for them. And social media just happens to be, once again, it's an unending fountain of new data that they can compete and basically be rewarded for. So scarcity is actually not that much of a technical challenge. Most of it is outsourced to the miners. They'll just self-organize around where the opportunities are best for them. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
No.
I think there's a couple aspects. One is like, again, there was day 4 was the great buyback era. You know, there were 3 days of the great buyback era. And there's a great saying in Silicon Valley that you want to be pre-revenue as long as possible, because a couple subnets came out and were like, we're doing a buyback. It's $3,000. And you're like, oh, maybe that's a little there. You know, look, we have 30 odd people. Do your own math on how much it costs to operate Macrocosmos. But like, the real matter is like, let's grow these things to insane levels. So when people are like, where's my buyback? Where's my extra cent on my alpha token that has lasted 3 weeks? Like, I'm much more interested in thinking about how do we blow the lid off the value of this thing? Like we think of ourselves now as like a sort of Series A type company. Like we have a bunch of maturing products, a bunch of research initiatives, and those things, again, it's not even our first birthday yet. That's on Saturday. So if we were any normal VC firm, VC-backed startup, people would be saying, let's put more money in, not can you start paying your revenue back? So we will be looking at how we can return value to alpha tokens through the revenue we gain. We're interviewing a load of salespeople now. Would I rather hire the absolute shark who takes 150 grand or the kind of B-rate person who takes 25 grand? And if we have to pay too much back that we can't operate as a business, these are considerations. So I also look forward to, in the next era, a bit more sensible discourse about how we help build world-beating subnets on Bittensor, not short-term Ponzi schemes. There's one subnet that's gone on about their tokenomics flywheel. They've got 6 fucking tokens. I don't understand which one they are. Their product doesn't fucking work and never has. Pardon my French. We're focused on building and creating something that has lasting value. So that's one piece. I think we are more aggressively looking at how we can give credit bonuses, incentivize people to be holders, use TAL payment rails. I think that's really exciting. And like, we want people to see the value and use this stuff. We think there's an immense amount of value in data. We think there's an immense amount of value in training Bittensor native models that might be used in a variety of ways across subnets. So we have loads of really clever ideas with tokenomics. To be candid, we're kind of watching still because the system's still stabilizing and we want to do things that are sustainable and will actually move the needle in the long term, not will create a really great Twitter post today. And maybe I'm not hype driven enough in some of those energies, Grant, but like I have conviction that what we're doing has immense long-term value. And, you know, when we've spoken, we've debated the sort of do you raise capital and other things. We've had validation of that from investors. So we're confident in our plan and we're confident there's a lot of good reasons to buy Alpha. But I think people need to make sure they do think of that long-term growth trajectory, not just how do I create a reason to buy things today? And, you know, for us, if our Alpha tokens get too low, we just sweep them up on a good deal, to be honest.
And then one last question before we end today. Well, this is the last question. What advice do you guys have for not being caught up in the short term and having that long-term vision and mindset in something as fast-paced as Bittensor?
Testnet is not mainnet. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. But in all seriousness, I think that we've had a fair number of teams come to us with pretty polished decks, looking for some sort of investment or some support. And I think that a lot of the time there are lofty ideas about how their subnet's going to work, radically challenged when they get on mainnet. So for teams, like I'd say for new teams, Bittensor is the epitome of the scrappy startup energy. You have to just get out there and talk to your community, harness the miners, harness the community, get them to work with you. They're holders. Get on mainnet, work with them, have an honest dialogue, show them the roadmap, be open to debate, and iterate quickly. Because there's nothing you can build on testnet that will survive a mainnet without major revisions. So I think it's really just embracing that chaos energy, and it's fun. Like it's a source of energy. It's obviously exhausting as well, but it's a real thrill. But that if we could start again, I think that for us, just really coming in ready to iterate as quickly as we need to do these things, and also be prepared to challenge our ideas. You know, be really candid with feedback. It will just make you move so much faster. And I guess one other thought for me as well is, you know, it's really important to have a monetization strategy for your subnet. To be honest, longer term. I think gone are the days when a compelling proof of concept was sufficient to get support. You know, the game's changed. Bittensor has matured. It's a good thing, you know, that the level is higher than ever. And I'm seeing really professional teams that show up and they're basically shipping product on day zero. Really, really cool. Hats off to those guys. I know how much work that is. Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts. Anything from you?
I think I'd echo the point about building in the open. Like pull out one team I have a massive amount of respect for, like Distributed Tensor and Templar. Like, they've been live since like October. They were ransacked with bugs. They had every error under the sun. Sam has kept building and building and building and has an amazing community on 3. It's very similar to what we had on 25 with Brian and Simon and our guys. But like, your miners are your community. Don't stiff them on weird emission cutbacks, stuff like this. Like, I'm in DMs with so many of our big miners about what we're doing. They're our holders now. Like, your miners are your holders. If your miners don't have conviction in what you're doing, you're screwed. So that's really important. The second element, it's a piece of advice given by me very early in our thing, is DCA every day. So if you're trying to build funds, pay salaries, cover compute costs, don't try game the market, understand subnet sentiment, understand crypto pricing. If that's your business, great. But just
That's your business, use Data Universe.
use Data Universe. But like, just find ways to let you focus on building and not get too caught up in staring at the price and worrying about that. For us in our first year, it meant we just sold a little bit every day. The inflationary rewards to keep us going. And it means that, when times are good, you don't get too excited. And when times are bad, you don't get too upset. And it means you'll be here for the long haul. So, for me, I just hope as many teams are here for the long haul on Bittensor as possible.